Are you thinking of buying, selling, or investing in real estate, but you don't know where to start? Have you searched for a realtor who will be nearby when they are needed, who will answer your calls and emails, who will go the extra mile to ensure your every need is met, who will help you with sourcing and supplying contractors while negotiating the best deal possible? Do you need a realtor who does not believe in high-pressure sales tactics or other gimmicks? Then you need me. My name is Steve Roy, and I offer a full-service professional sales and customized marketing package for my clients. I am helping clients with buying, selling, and investing. I will build a custom plan to fit your needs. I will work closely with you to ensure that you achieve your goals. My services include not only an analysis of your local market and correct pricing, but I will also help you to prepare your home for sale and make it look as desirable as possible to buyers by providing expert advice, using professional quality photographs, and compelling descriptions. Let me help you minimize cost and maximize your profits. Call me today, 207-649-8522.
And I came here in 1986 to run it for myself, and I signed the papers, and I was owner of the Red Barn Incorporated. People come in here for the experience, more so than I think anything else. And they love the fact that somebody's actually taking the time to listen. Maybe you learn in proportion to how much you listen and care. If you can find that balance between doing what you love that isn't really work, that might pay the bills, and can resonate with people, and actually to some extent help people. Without my customers, I would be doing what I don't love, guaranteed.
Today's Kennebec Valley Forum is brought to you by Elder Law Offices of John and Mark Nale of Nale Law Offices, located at 58 Elm Street. Give them a call at 207-660-9191 or visit them online at nailelaw.com.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I am John Nale. I am an elder law attorney, and as an elder law attorney, I am aware that May is National Older Americans Month. And as an elder law attorney and as an older American myself, I am aware of the changes and challenges that come with the aging process. One of the challenges that come with the aging process is the very real possibility of elder abuse. The most common type of elder abuse being financial elder abuse, which has been called the crime of the 21st century. Here with me today is Ricker Hamilton. Ricker is the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services. Ricker, welcome, and thank you for joining us here today to talk about elder financial abuse. Ricker, before we get into the subject of elder financial abuse, can you please tell us a little bit about the Office of Aging and Disability Services and its mission?
I'd be pleased to. The Office of Aging and Disability Services serves a wide variety of individuals, those of us with intellectual disabilities and autism, and also all the aging services. So it's a spectrum of all the waivers that we have for home and community-based services. It includes adult protective services, which you've just referenced. And we also work with facilities, investigating facilities and communities, and also work with our partners, provider agencies, and providers as well.
You were a speaker at the Maine Council for Elder Abuse and Prevention Summit that I attended as well. And you talked about the role of adult protective services in preventing elder abuse. Could you tell us more about that,
Sure.
Ricker?
First, I want to thank you for your attendance. It was very important to have the Elder Bar and your reputation and what you've done in the past for seniors. We appreciate you being at the conference. We had national speakers from the University of Southern California, from Washington, D.C., former Department of Justice employee, and Dr. Burns from Toronto. And we talked about the challenges of dealing with those of us who are being abused, neglected, or exploited. And as you've also mentioned, financial exploitation is the most common form. Those of us that work in the field know that there's co-occurring. So whether it's abuse or neglect, usually there's co-occurring forms of it. There's multiple forms of abuse. The challenge is those of us who are being taken advantage of, a couple of things. One, it's most often someone that's very close to us. It's a family member, loved one, or caregiver. And secondly, we're embarrassed that we're in the situation. We don't know who to reach out to. So I'm hoping with your questions today in this program, you're opening the door for some of us who don't know where to turn to call someone and talk about it, because none of us should be a victim.
So for anybody watching who may know of or suspect that elder abuse is happening to an elder, what should they do? Who should they call?
The first thing I would do is make sure that you're talking with your family members. If it's a family member who you think is abusing, I would always turn people to talk to their attorneys as well. Many families have long established relationship with attorneys. I would do that. Law enforcement as well. Another thing that you can do is call the 800 number 24 hours a day, 1-800-624-8404. You don't have to provide your name or anything specific. If you just want information, call and say, this is the situation I'm in, this is what's happening to me, what should I do? You get information that way. But the best thing for any of us to do is to be open and communicate and honest with people that are around us. And that's why we encourage family members to have discussions with older family members so that we're prepared so this exploitation and abuse never occurs. But if it does and you don't know where to turn, I would call that 800 number.
And the 800 number is to the Office of Adult Protective Services?
Yes, it's 24 hours a day, after hours and weekends. It's adult and children's emergency services, but we have people who specialize in dealing with adult protective services, adults, available 24 hours a day.
So can you tell us the process, say, when somebody does call Adult Protective Services, what that call is going to initiate in terms of action or investigation by the service?
That's a very good question, because if I was calling, I'd want to know what's going to happen with the information I share. The information is confidential. If you don't want this information shared, you can just say that you don't want the information shared. You just want to talk to someone about it. The questions I would ask you if you call me and I answered the phone that day, I would want to know how you're doing physically. Do you need any help? Are you living independently? How are you living independently? Tell me a little bit about your health. As someone coming in, is it concerning an agency or is it a family member? I'd want to learn as much about you as I possibly could. And then I would start to ask you questions about, do you feel at risk? Is someone making you do something that's uncomfortable? Are we talking about abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation? And I think those questions in that conversation would begin to get the information we need, that I need to begin to give you options. But remember, you're in the driver's seat, you've made the call, your information is confidential, and if you don't want information shared, it won't be.
So after you receive the call and you gather that initial amount of information, then what would be the next step?
If you were on the phone, I would tell you that I'd probably going to send the case to be looked at for intake assessment to see whether or not we can help you. If we can't, we're going to refer you to other resources. There may be, your questions may have something to do with an elder law attorney. We'll refer you to an attorney. We'll refer you to Legal Services for the Elderly, Area Agency on Aging. But if it's a protective situation, that referral is going to go to the regional office that's nearest to your home and be assigned to a caseworker to contact you to do a home visit.
Okay. And then as a result of the home visit, then what might happen next if they do find evidence of abuse?
If you're like most of us and you're capacitated, meaning you can make informed consent decisions, our job is just to give you options. Sometimes the biggest message that we can deliver is that there's nothing that you've ever done or didn't do that you deserve to be a victim of this. Right. Oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, I'm guilty, I feel ashamed, and the people who are abusing or financially exploiting us are making us think and telling us things that we're the fault of it. We're not the fault of any of this. My love for a family member shouldn't be dependent on whether I'm getting a check from them or not. And I think the biggest message that we can deliver is that there's no excuse for abuse, and that no one should be a victim of this for any reason. That's a powerful message, because what happens is the perpetrators of this form of family violence are counting on isolation. They want to be the only conduit of information, and they're telling the person that they've been a bad mom, a bad grandmother, and that they deserve this. And if they tell anybody, they're going to end up in a nursing home. So what perpetrators generally do is pick on our greatest fears. So what I can do is someone from the department is to tell you, you don't deserve this. Here's what your options are. And to know that it may not be criminal prosecution. The victim may not want us to prosecute their son or granddaughter, but they then may be able to protect their assets of their home. That's why I mentioned, John, a number of times that we talk about talking with their attorneys and legal services for the elderly. There may be some civil remedies that they can have that doesn't involve a criminal investigation, but my assets and my independence are protected.
How many calls a year does Adult Protective Services receive regarding these matters? How many calls?
Approximately 4,000 calls in our intake unit. But I can tell you that elder abuse, financial exploitation, the largest form of family violence is underreported and unrecognized. We should have, based on our population in Maine, 4 to 6% of us over age 60 are victims. That's about 14,000 people. So we're still missing a great number of victims. Victims who are afraid to tell anybody what's happening, or victims who lack capacity and they're being taken care of. They don't know who to contact.
What are the risk factors that we should be aware of regarding the possibility of the vulnerability to elder abuse of any form, and particularly financial elder abuse?
It's a very, very good question. Thank you for asking that. I would say the number one is isolation. Stephen Rowe used to be our Attorney General, would always give a speech, and he would always include elder abuse as one of his 2 or 3 topics when he spoke. And he referenced what he said is Maine are good neighbors. We ought to have a good neighbor program. So isolation, that's what perpetrators count on us, whether we're isolated within the home or in the community. So I would tell you to watch for changes. If someone who's always been to church or to the meal site or have been out and about, all of a sudden you're not seeing them anymore. All of a sudden you're noticing they have a new best friend. All of a sudden you notice someone has moved in with them. For mail carriers and for law enforcement, we always say to them, all of a sudden mail's not going to the house, it's going to a post office box. So we try to tell people in the family and in the professional fields, look for changes in behavior. Now it may be a health or mental health issue, that's fine. What this process is, and what Steve Rowe kept referring to, was just check it out for yourself. Knock on the door, see how I'm doing. Because isolation is where this all happens. They become to be victims, they're being told that they're worth less, they're being told that they deserve this behavior, and they're being told if they say anything, their worst fears will come through. So I'd say isolation. For our partners in the banking and the financial industry, all of a sudden people's names are being added to accounts, withdrawals. There's activity that just doesn't seem right at all. For our doctors and nurses, all of a sudden people aren't going to the doctors anymore. This relative is calling and canceling the appointments. The faith community, the synagogue, the churches, the mosque, people who've always been attached, all of a sudden that they're not. Those are the type of things that would be red flags to me, not necessarily that abuse and neglect and exploitation is occurring, but that would dictate to me that it needs further investigation.
And what are the mandatory reporting requirements, and then what are the protections for a person who just merely is suspicious?
Right, very good question.
Elder abuse.
Mandatory reporting simply says there's a list of professionals, and the Maine legislature developed this in '82 and then made some changes since then. Those of us, while acting in our professional capacity, some of the professions, doctors, social workers, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech, there's a whole list. If we suspect that someone's being abused and neglected, and we suspect that they lack capacity or are dependent, and we've learned this information through our professional, that's the mandatory part of it. Then you're mandated to report to us. You're protected from liability if you do. But the legislature was very insightful at the time. They also included optional reporting. So any of us can make a call. I always go by gut feelings. You probably do too. That's why I said to say to people, if you think something wrong is happening, go ahead and report it. You're protected by that. Don't fear that you're making these allegations that you're going to get in trouble to do that. Plus, your report could be confidential. You could call that 800 number and never give us your name. I would encourage you to do that. But under mandatory reporting, that's the 2 factors. As a mandated reporter, a doctor who's doing a physical exam says, oh my goodness, this bruising, this is not consistent with a fall. This is more of physical abuse. In the faith community, someone comes in and talks and says, I'm afraid at home. He's hurt me in the past. I can't sleep at night. Professions who learn that way are mandated. The rest of us, those of us who are professionals on that list, but we're home and it's a neighbor, it's optional reporting, and everyone's protected if they call.
Well, just a suspicion.
Just a suspicion. The best thing that can happen is to have a suspicion, to have a caseworker go to the home and discover that it's not abuse, neglect, or exploitation, but the person needs services and doesn't know how to get them, doesn't know about home delivered meals, congregate meal sites, has no idea of the varied resources that you and I take for granted they may not know of. And that's the best thing that can happen with that report.
So in focusing on elder financial abuse, we know that a lot of times banks are the not the target, but we know that banks sometimes are where the financial abuse takes place. What can banks do to help prevent the misuse of funds by maybe people on accounts or being added to accounts? What can they do?
We have worked closely and done statewide training on 2 occasions with our financial institutions, so Maine Community Banks, the credit unions, and the Maine Banking Association. So we have developed products for them that the tellers can have in front of them that talks about something that's outside of the purview. All of a sudden, one of the risk factors we hear from bankers is all of a sudden the person they've known for 20, 30, 40 years, they've known the family for 60 years, all of a sudden a new best friend is coming into the branch and standing behind them, just out of sight. They're having them do $5,000 withdrawals when they've only done $400 or $500 in their time. So we've worked with the banks. They can call us directly, and they're protected as well. They can just have an allegation of it, and we proceed with doing an investigation and talking with a person. Another thing, John, I should mention is, if a person doesn't want us to go to the home because someone's there, we can work with that person to meet with them outside of the home, meet with them at their attorney's office, their doctor's office, if they go to a meal site. So there's things we can do. And with our financial institutions, one of the things that we teach them to do, if something doesn't seem right, if all of a sudden someone's standing in the background, we ask the tellers in the training to say, this deposit or withdrawal is a little bit beyond my purview. Could you just meet with the branch manager? That process of slowing it down and bringing the person into the branch manager's office, often that new best friend is out the door.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing we have to be prepared of, we never know when an older person is going to disclose to us. You and your relationship that you have with your clients, you may be the first person they dare to tell anything to.
Right.
And that's what we say to people. They may be coming in to talk to you about another legal issue or doing something, and then all of a sudden, because of the relationship that you have, and the same with a doctor, they're going to say, I'm afraid at Rick at home. He's been abusing me. And that's why we try to have mandatory reporting in what we're doing, and that's why shows that you're doing now is so important, is to tell people that there's options, to remind people that no matter what we've done, we don't deserve to be abused. And we're talking about 4 to 6% of us. The vast majority of family members don't hurt or exploit their families.
You're right.
We're just talking about the 4 to 6% who do, the same as domestic violence, the same as child abuse. And that's really what this is. It's not to be a broad brush that family members do that often. What we see more often, and I've seen in my 40-year career, family members work themselves acutely ill. They end up in the hospital trying to take care of someone they would never think to abuse or exploit anyone.
You're exactly right on that, Rick. You raise an important point there. There are many good families in Maine trying to help their parents and doing the right thing. As Ricka says, it's the 4 to 6% that this program is addressed to. Ricka, also at the conference, you and others spoke about an evidence-based type of response, and could you talk a little bit about the evidence-based and the person-centered approach that you're taking, and then the goal assessment scale that you folks are trying to put into place?
You took very good notes, John. Thank you for those questions. We had M.T. Conley, we had Dr. Laura Moscato from the University of Southern California, and we had Dr. Stephen Burns from Toronto. What we're doing here in Maine, we've been working with goal attainment. That simply means if I visit you, you come to visit me, you're from Adult Protective Services, and you have a referred that I've been abused and neglected. The goal attainment says, well, what is it that I want to have happen? Let's
Right.
not talk about the criminal prosecution of that. Let's not talk, what is it that I want you to do for me to make me safe? Often, I don't want my son to be removed from the house.
Right.
He's my only link. I love
Right.
him.
Right.
He may not be the nicest guy in the world, but that's my link. He does take care of me. So I may not want him to go to jail. So it kind of changes things around. It's asking the older person, the person with disabilities, what is it that I want to make myself safe? So the goal attainment might be, I just don't want him to take any more of my money. I don't want him arrested. I want him to be in my home. And what can you do to help me get him substance abuse treatment? Instead of me coming in and doing my assessment and finding that you're competent, but you're dependent and you've been abused, and now I need to make a referral to law enforcement, your greatest nightmare may come true. Your only caregiver is going to go out and you may end up in a long-term care
Right.
facility. So that's what Dr. Stevens Burns is doing. We're doing a pilot with 12 caseworkers, and they developed some very specific questions, and the goal attainment is 5 areas, 0 to +1 to -2, -2 to +2. And it's how well have we done to get to the goals that you want? That's the person-centered part of that. We're challenging adult protective services now, and Maine is at the forefront of this. We're challenging ourselves. Assumptions were made in the 70s and 80s about adult protective services. It was built on child protective services. The statutes were there. Maine has one of the model statutes in the country still. But we're trying to change around is, let's put the victim in the driver's seat. Let's make sure we're working on goals that he or she wants us to do. And whatever they think is success is ought to be success. Our job then is to talk about options and to help them get that way. And here's the big part, John, that changes. Working more closely with the alleged perpetrators.
Right.
Maybe if Johnny does get this opiate treatment or drug treatment, he's going to be fine. We can't
Right.
leave him alone. Mom wants him in the house. I can tell you, if my son was abusing me, I'm not going to want him to go to jail to prosecute him. I want him to stop it. That way, we can stop the financial exploitation. I would have them call your office and get in contact with you. You could do some things to protect their assets. You talk with a financial institution. We could have our caseworkers working with that victim, getting them connected to groups if they needed to do that. And at the same time, we could partner with other agencies to make sure that that son is getting the treatment, or at least offer the treatment. That's that goal attainment, which is a part of it. It's also person-centered, and it's also looking at focusing on the victim's safety. I will tell you, it's a challenge. Maine is at the front. You heard it at the conference. M.T. Conley is going to have a book published in about a year, and I'm just excited to think these professionals from across the country, like Dr. Laura Mosqueda
Right.
at USC, wants to work with us and to challenge what we're doing. It's the same as your business, John. The client's the boss, and what we're trying to do in adult protective services is to refocus and remind ourselves that the client is the boss, protect their safety, but we need to work with them as to what they want to have done. We don't want their biggest nightmare to come true, which often happens is they end up in a long-term care facility. We want them to stay in their home.
Right, right. So I think also at the conference it was reported that 90% of the abuse is perpetrated by a family member, a caregiver, or a friend.
Yeah.
And then what advice can we give a caregiver? Because as we know, caregivers very often outwork themselves, and then in doing that, they become maybe short-tempered, and then they cause maybe physical abuse. What advice can we give the caregiver before they get into that situation?
And I'd back up one more step. I would say to family members, have those discussions as my mom and dad did. Their health wasn't well. So they made sure to tell their 3 children, should this happen, this is what I want to have happen. Those discussions are uncomfortable. I always like doing it at a Thanksgiving table or Christmas table, wherever the family's around. Be sure you let the family know what you want to do, where your papers are. I would encourage people to have discussions with their attorneys and doctors long before they need it. The vast majority of us will never need long-term care, be in a nursing home, ever. But end-of-life decisions, yes, that should be done. So I would tell people to have those discussions. If they have those discussions And it's all in place, as I did with my mom and dad. When the time came for saying, I know my mom wouldn't want any more treatment, it wasn't a decision I had to make. The whole family knew these was her wishes. So I would tell you to back up, have those discussions, and you won't have any problems. For caregivers, and the vast majority of caregivers are family members. I mean, we don't have that many people around doing it. Just make sure that the parameters are set, that if you begin to, caregiver stress looks more like this. It looks like I don't sleep and I don't take care of myself, as opposed to reach out and be short-tempered. But that does happen, as you mentioned, John. I would just make sure that they're taking care of themselves, to make sure that they have those discussions. If they have feelings that they're becoming overwhelmed, it's probably because they are. If the family members and caregivers are overwhelmed, they've probably done more work than most human beings can do themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to reach out for help. Is there an agency that can help? Is mom or dad qualified for a main care or other services? Talk with the family doctor. Is there a way to get mom admitted to the hospital? Is there some skilled care that can happen? There's a lot of those communications that we can have with our area agencies on aging, legal service of the elderly, elder bar attorneys, experts like yourself, and others that will prevent that. Just know what those signs and symptoms are. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're overeating, you're at your wit's end. We know that. When we all of us that have children, we notice like those sleepless nights when they come, and we laugh and talk about it. What we forget about now is often these same people are now the mothers and grandmothers caring for family members, and they never want to say no, and they put themselves in a situation to fail. So I would have those early communications, make sure that it's clear. I've done it. My mom and dad, it was tough decisions, but my wife and I and my brother and sister, we learned from them. Everything's in place. We have our advanced directives, we have our will, we have all of this in place. We have it set up about finances, and people can check back and forth. The best way is to prevent it, and if you can't prevent it, reach out for help. And as you said, you're spot on, John. Make sure caregivers ask for that help as well.
And as a community, what efforts can a community make in terms of connecting with first responders and the fire department and doctors? How can we create a better and a closer webbing of networking within the community?
Just talk about elder abuse as often as we hear about child abuse, animal abuse, and domestic violence. Now, I challenge that your audience and others will say that. They'll say, tell me the last time you saw a public service announcement about elder abuse. You don't. So victims think that somehow they're the odd person out, they're responsible. We just need to talk about it more. We need to make sure that we support our EMTs, law enforcement, our doctors, our emergency rooms. We need to educate them as to what are the signs to look for. How would I act if I was an abuser and I came into the emergency room? We teach at the Criminal Justice Academy to law enforcement people as they go through as cadets. What is it that I would say at the door? We show them videos. So they're prepared in their mind already to know what the excuses are, the blaming, and to be able to ask those questions, and at the same time making sure the victim is safe. And I think just talking about it, making sure if there's questions, the department's always available to do training. We do a lot of training for professional groups. It's just talking about it, increasing awareness, and making sure people report and recognize the forms of abuse and neglect.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Ricka. Let's see. Anything else that you'd like to tell our listening audience today that they can help each other and help the elder in terms of preventing elder abuse? Anything that you'd like to close with?
I would close just what you and I have covered during this segment is if you think something is wrong, it probably is. Pick up the phone and call. Be a good Maine neighbor. It's okay if it's not what you think it is. It could be something else, but if it's abuse and neglect and exploitation, I can tell you that those of us who are victims of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation die at an exceedingly higher rate than non-victims. Even financial exploitation, we think of neglect of our health care and physical abuse. Those of us who have gone through financial exploitation, have lost everything and been taken advantage by someone that we've loved and very close to us, our partner attorneys in LSE would tell you they call it financial abuse, not exploitation, because a lot of us just give up. Mm-hmm. So the mortality rate for victims are very high. That's why it's incumbent upon us as neighbors, as family members, to report and talk if we think something's wrong. That's probably the biggest thing we can do, John.
Okay, Ricka, thank you. And thanks to our community television station for allowing us to put on this presentation. I'd like to encourage all of the listeners today to remember that Father Time and Mother Nature are not going to spare any of us. We're all going to have our day as older Americans, and the purpose of today's presentation is to present information regarding financial elder abuse and how it happens and what can be done to prevent it. Please take the action that you think is necessary to protect a family member or yourself from elder abuse. And please, as our guest reported, please feel free to call Adult Protective Services at 1-800-624-8404. Ricka, we thank you very much for taking the time to come here and share that information with us. Thank you all very much.